You know, I've had a lot of fun with this project. I have been collecting for quite a while, and the reason I wrote the book was because my collection, which is really my hobby, was starting to get very expensive, and I had to find a way to pay for it. So I figured by writing a book, it could help offset some of the costs of buying all these wonderful things. And the book came out in the late fall, and it's done extremely well. I've been speaking at museums all across the country, and I have to say that the Cooper-Hewitt is clearly my favorite, so thank you for having me. I first started my collection of what I call antiques of the future about 25 years ago. I had just gotten out of architecture school, and it was in fact in the late 70s, early 80s. It was a terrible time to be an architect. Interest rates were at an all-time high, and the construction industry was down, and there really wasn't a lot of work around. And although I did find a job as an architect, the work wasn't very interesting, so I eventually changed careers and went into the giftware and home furnishings industries. Well, inasmuch as it was difficult for me to find work, it was that much harder for the more established architects to find the interesting and substantial commissions. So they too were looking for other things to design, and furniture and furnishings was the natural extension. So a trend began. Architects started crossing over and were designing dishes and tea kettles and toilet brushes. And I saw all these things because I saw them at the trade shows. I was reading trade journals, and I was going to museum exhibits and seeing what was winning design awards. And I thought, well, you know, I might never be able to own a building by Michael Graves, but I could certainly own one of his products. So I started collecting them. And over the years, I have probably amassed between 250 and 300 objects. And you can imagine that it's very easy for a collection to get out of control. So as I was collecting, I realized I had to clearly define what I thought were the antiques of the future. So I came up with a definition. And I've define it as mass-produced but highly designed objects that are being made today that I believe, once they're no longer in production, will go up in value because they represent the best of design in their time. Now, best of design is a pretty subjective term, so I tried to take my own opinion out of the picture and select objects that the design industry said were important. So each of the objects in my collection has either won design awards, been exhibited in museums, been designed by the renowned architects and designers of today, or have been highly touted by the press. Now, the first object I always love to talk about is the Oxo Good Grip Swivel Peeler, which you saw me talk about in the Today Show clip. And it's because something so readily available, so inexpensive, could be so highly regarded and be museum quality product. It's won major design awards. Many of you probably have it at home in your kitchen drawer. And it was that concept that really appealed to me. Or maybe you've seen the Tyco rubber radio. This was featured on the cover of Time magazine's issue, The Rebirth of Design. And it is a water repellent radio where the antenna is also you turn the antenna and it changes the channels. And here's the Garbo can, which you saw me show before by Karam Rashid. And this trash can really was the first major product that Karam had designed, and because of its success, really put him on the industrial design map. Well, these are the kinds of objects that museum curators, design experts, and industry analysts have deemed the noteworthy designs in their time. And these are what I collect. These are what I think are going to become the antiques of the future. Well, one of the first companies to tap into this new design source of readily available architects was Swig Pal, a company that got started in 1982. They only used well-known architects and designers to design their dinnerware and tabletop accessories. This is called the grandmother pattern, and it was designed by Robert Venturi. And like his architecture, where he was known for taking traditional imagery and reinterpreting it in a very playful way, he did the same thing here with this design. It's based on a vintage tablecloth pattern, which might look very familiar, but then he inflated it and simplified the details, and almost like a cartoon, added these bold black dashes. The result is a totally new and contemporary look. This one's called Tuxedo, and it was designed by the architectural firm of Gwatham E. Siegel. Now, as architects, they were modernists, and they were known for their clean, elegant, geometric forms. Well, they used the same ideas here with this plate design, where they translated the pattern into an elemental and classical black and white motif. Actually, this was Swig Pal's most successful selling design. Well, Swig Pal no longer exists today, so if you have any of these, hold on to them. They've more than doubled and tripled in value, as indicated by going online and seeing what their replacement costs are. Well, if there is one product that best reflected the emergence of the American appetite for designer home furnishings, it is the Whistling Bird tea kettle. And as you heard me speak about it in the Today Show, it's kind of hard. I have this presentation all organized, and then I have the Today Show clip, and it sort of interferes a little bit with my presentation. But I love to talk about this tea kettle because you wonder, why was this one so successful? Why did this sell 1.5 million units, and it's still in production 22 years later? And in 1985, it cost $175. And how many people paid that kind of money that long ago for a tea kettle? So I've tried to analyze what is so successful about this design. And I think that when it first came out, Americans had never seen anything like this before. They there hadn't been the profusion of designer home furnishings that there was in Europe. So this was really the first one to come on the scene in a large way. And it's got, the overall silhouette looks like a colonial kettle, so it has a familiarity there. And then the coloration with the red and blue has an American color palette. And the bird whistle, which is a rooster, is has a touch of humor without being too silly. And Michael Graves had grown up on a farm, and the first sound he had heard in the morning was the rooster crowing. So how apropos that the first sound we should hear is this whistle blowing. So I think for all of those reasons, it just hit the American taste right. And it really paved the way for the profusion of designer products that have followed. But with the success of this tea kettle, the design elements were translated into other products like the salt and pepper shaker. And Michael Graves also experimented with other tea kettles, some more successful than others. This is called Ferris, and when the steam comes out of the spout, it spins that little wheel, the Ferris wheel. This one hasn't had quite the success of the Whistling Bird. And then he translated his very successful tea kettle for Target with another variation. This one costs only $35. But he came to the attention of Target because of the Whistling Bird tea kettle, and many of you may know of the profusion of designs that he has since created for them. And one of the most successful products he did for Target was this toaster. It came out in his first collection in 1999. And here he uses the same, familiar American primary color palette. The overall shape of the toaster is actually the outline of the top of a piece of bread. And each element has been carefully thought through in terms of its shape, its color, its pattern, its design. And it's quite remarkable. It won the Good Design Award. It was featured in Target's advertising, and it's no longer available. Well, as Michael Graves paved the way for other designers, the next designer to really come on the scene in the United States, although he had been renowned in Europe, was Philippe Starck. And this is probably his most successful and most well-recognized product that he's done here in the United States. This is called Juicy Salif, and if you've never seen it before, you might say, is that a rocket ship? Is it a spider? What is that? And getting the viewer to stop and think and wonder was exactly the response that Philippe Starck wanted. Rather than having it be obvious, he took some of the most basic household objects and completely rethought their designs. Now, many people say that this is more sculpture for the counter or for the stove, and I think, again, that was his intention. This is not something you tuck away and put in a drawer or a cabinet. And he took that same point of view with this beautiful colander. This is called Max Le Chinois. It's an overscaled colander, and I will admit it is a bit overpriced. It's probably twice the size of a normal colander in height. It's made of brass and chrome, and it comes with a liner so that it can double as a vase or as a bowl. Now, not everything that Philippe Starck did was of such high-end materials. He also worked with plastics, and this is called DrScud, and it's probably the first freestanding fly swatter. Stands on that little tripod, and if you look at the face of the fly swatter, it has in fact in its perforations a face. Now, rumor has it that it's Philippe Starck's face in that fly swatter because he hates flies and he wants his own little personal revenge as we swat them and kill them. One other object that I love of what Philippe Starck has done is called the POA hand weights, and they're asymmetrical hand weights. They're ergonomic because they really respond to the weightlifting process. Most of the tension on the arm is where the muscle is, and so that's where the heavier part of the weight is. And the outer side of the arm, where you don't want to put as much stress, he's made that part of the weight lighter. And in fact, I've tried these, and it makes the lifting of a weight is entirely different than it would be if they were of equal weight on both sides. So it is a really beautifully designed object. As architects started to design all of these products, the industrial design profession started to evolve as well. And as you saw before when I showed the Garbo can, Karim Rashid came on the scene and became one of the most well-known industrial designers creating today. And this was the kickoff product that he used. And it's made out of a single piece of plastic. It's injection molded plastic, so it has no seam. The cutouts in the handles are cut right out of the sides, so it's very elegantly designed. It is in the shape of a woman's bodice, so I think that's why he calls it Garbo, after Greta Garbo. And it is no longer available. He now has other versions, Garbino, a smaller one, but this is the original one. This is the first. This is another product by Karim Rashid that I love. It's called the Kissing Salt and Pepper Shakers, and it's made out of it's made by a company called Nambe that had been around for years, making more traditional products. They're from Santa Fe, and they make things out of metal alloy. Well, they hired Karim to come in and look at their manufacturing facilities and to come up with new product ideas. And this is one of my favorite that he came up with. It looks like it's made out of silver, but it is out of this metal alloy. It's flat at the top and bottom, so they come together beautifully. And in fact, you only need one hand to pass both the salt and pepper shakers. And yet, when you pull them apart, they look just as beautiful. He also did this chess set. And the pieces are all an abstract shapes that are made of a translucent rubber. And this is maybe the only chessboard you will ever see that uses dots instead of the traditional checkerboard. The board itself is an acrylic box that opens up and stores the pieces. Now, one of the things Karam Rashid is known for is using the same vocabulary of shapes in different products. So if you keep your eye on the dark gray pawn on the left of the screen, and you look at that shape, it looks like an hourglass. It's morphed into a dish soap bottle. This is a design that he did for a company called Method. Now, Method is just a few years old, and their products are biodegradable household cleaning products. And when they came on the scene, there were a lot of other companies that had the same type of product. So they were trying to figure out a way to distinguish their product from all of the others on the shelves. And they decided to do that through design. So they had heard about Karam Rashid, and they hired him to create this wonderful bottle. And the way it works is you squeeze it in the middle. You don't turn it upside down. You squeeze it in the middle, and there's an opening at the base. It releases the soap, and then when you stop squeezing, the base closes up. The opening in the base closes up, and it doesn't drip. It's really beautiful. This was the first one that went on the shelves. It's not really available anymore except online. He came out with a smaller version. This one actually is very hard to use for a woman. I think Karam is a very tall man, and oftentimes he will design a product for his body type. He came out with a smaller version of the bottle, I think for more of a woman's hand. But this was really a distinctive bottle where the product was known not for what was inside it, but for the bottle. And it did come to the attention of Target, and they now are one of the huge distributors of Method products. Well, at this point, I think you can see how design has been brought into many different types of product categories that had never really used it so effectively before. But can you think back over the past 10 years of a company that transformed not only its product, but an entire industry through design? Well, if you said Apple, or if you thought Apple, you were right. The iMac G3 came out in 1998, and the computer industry was changed forever. Up until that point, Apple had been losing market share to the PCs and really needed to find a way to recapture it. So although they had previously changed the interior workings of the computer to be more user-friendly, they now revolutionized its physical design. And what a sensation it created. It completely changed how we viewed computers. No longer were they the purely putty-colored affairs that were relegated to back rooms of offices and stores. These computers came out on the front desks and on the front of counters. And they originally came in the turquoise, but eventually came in 5 colors. And people would select a color to fit their personality. Well, this really proved to the world the power of design and the importance of design, and it started to become integrated into so many other products. Another one is the Dyson vacuum cleaner. Dyson also completely redesigned, James Dyson redesigned both the interior workings and the exterior look of the Dyson vacuum cleaner. He created his first prototype in 1993, and in changing the technology, he made it the first bagless vacuum. The canister is transparent, probably so that you could have the fun of seeing the dirt suck in, but more practically so that you could tell when it was full. But here's the interesting thing about this vacuum cleaner. It was really designed for men in mind. It came in this bright yellow color originally, which is traditionally the color of power tools, and the attachments had an erector set quality to them. I think maybe he was hoping that men might take up more of the vacuuming. But you know, this is not an inexpensive vacuum cleaner, but it was the top-selling vacuum in England for 10 years before it came to the United States, and still is an extraordinary seller. Well, you know, after this whole design thing started to take off, there was no territory that designers left unexplored. And that was certainly true for things as lowly as toilet brushes. And here you saw this before, the Excalibur, that really is based on a sword because of the task of having to clean the bathroom. And here is Myrtle, the one that is really, you know, hard to figure out what is this. And when you pull it from the pot, it's ready for the pot. And then to go even more bizarre is Talk, where it looks like, you know, some kind of strange alien, so that maybe the idea here is that even though you think you're alone in the bathroom, you might just not be. Well, humor is one of those characteristics that started to show up in the past 25 years of design. It never really had been there before. And there were so many products that used humor, although they were beautifully designed. This one is called Shipshape, and it looks like a child's toy, but once you figure out what it is, you see that it's really a very cleverly designed and practical butter dish. This is called Magneto, and you know, you might look at this and have absolutely no idea what it is. Well, when you pull these apart, it's a salt and pepper shaker. And this very simple object has so many very difficult design features. How to get the magnets to keep the salt and pepper shaker together but not be so strong that it's too hard to pull them apart. How to keep the salt and pepper from going into each other as this thing spins on the table. How to take the metal plate off and refill it with it still being able to fit snugly back into the grooves. So this one went through many, many prototypes to create this very simple and elegant salt and pepper shaker. And here's Flower Power. This is actually something I have in my office and I use it all the time, so it's a great fan. And this is my Max heater that is, you know, space heaters are, you know, designing a space heater was really something that had never been done before, and to give it so much personality and humor, you know, this is something that becomes part of the decoration of a room. Well, as design was advancing, so was technology. And one of my most favorite designers is Marcel Wanders, who created this knotted rope chair. It looks like it's made out of macrame, but in fact, this is a high-tech fiber that is woven into the shape of a chair. It is then dipped into a resin and placed over a frame to dry. And when it hardens, it has both strength and resiliency. But it weighs less than 3 pounds and holds up to at least 185. So taking, you know, a historic product like macrame and juxtaposing it with state-of-the-art of technology is the point of view that this designer has. And he's applied it to other products as well. This one is called the blowlamp. And at first it looks like a small electrified candelabra, but the way you turn it on is you blow on it. Blow again, and the light turns off. Magic? Maybe. Well, the trick is there's actually a sound sensor behind the candle, and it's the blowing sound that activates the light. Well, sometimes it's not the product that gets attention, but the packaging. And that could not be truer than that of bottle design. And this is the Voss water bottle that you had seen before. This is frequently left out on the tables in restaurants because restaurants like to use this as a status symbol. It really resembles, you know, an elegant bottle of cologne. And most water bottles are made out of plastic, so it distinguishes itself in that regard as well. One of my most favorite water bottles is the Teenant bottle by Lovegrove, who has been an industrial designer who designed for such diverse clients as Louis Vuitton, Hermes, Mazda, and Pottery Barn. Well, he took his very strong design sense and applied it to this asymmetrical water bottle, which really took a manufacturing tour de force. The surface is sculpted so it looks like melting ice or flowing water. It's what I like to call visual onomatopoeia. It looks like what it is. And it's won many awards, again, not for the water so much as for this unique bottle design. It's also ergonomic, so it's very easy to hold on to it. Well, in addition to water bottles, there's something else that I collect for the package design, and that is Swatch Watches. This is called the Skeleton Lumi Swatch, and it has a traditional watch inside the mouth of the dinosaur, but it comes in this great plastic dinosaur. That's the packaging. You press down on the tail, the mouth opens, the tongue protrudes, and there's the watch. Now, this is packaging you're definitely not going to throw away. This one is called Feathers, and this swatch is comes in this vinyl green child's carrying case, and the watch in this case is as extraordinary as its packaging. But it's really quite an amazing product. And Swatch did not charge more money for their packaging, but they brought out specialized packaging. And the ones that I collected tended to be the ones that were not made out of paper, but out of some other material, because I really thought that the packaging added such great value to the object itself. And one last one that I want to show you is called Vis and Zip. And this was designed by Kenny Scharf, and it was a watch with a matching tie or an accompanying tie. Well, today it's very hard to find both of these together. So if you do have them, they've tripled in value since their original cost. Well, this is a sampling of the kinds of things that I collect. But the next logical question people always ask me is, well, how do I know when an object has become an antique of the future? Well, the great thing about a collection like this is I really don't have to prove it, because things become antiques at different times. But I do have to demonstrate I'm on the right track. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that I collected early on that have now gone up in value. This one is called Xolo, and it's one of the first products that I bought. It was designed in 1980 by Byron Glaser and Sandra Higashi, and it was this wonderful reinterpretation of Mr. Potato Head. And it won all sorts of awards and sold extremely well and came out with multiple versions. There was Xolo II, Xolo III, Pop Xolo, Xolo Agogo. But this was the first version. It came in a wooden crate, and it came with these little pouches that would hold all of the products with the raffia. Well, it originally sold for $175, and the designer just told me that one went on eBay for $1,500. Another product that is no longer in production is the Hot Berta Tea Kettle by Philippe Starck. Now, this came out in 1990, and it sold for about 7 years, and then it was discontinued. And in fact, Philippe Starck said this is the product he's most ashamed of. You know, it's very hard to figure out how it works. But nonetheless, for some reason, it became a design icon of the late 20th century. It's in just about every reference book on the subject matter, and it originally sold for $150, and I just checked eBay before I came, and there was one going for $400 that was in mint condition. But sometimes it's not that something's no longer in production that causes it to go up in value, but the fact that over time the cost of production has increased so significantly. This is the first chair, and it came out in 1983, and it originally cost $365, but today it has more than doubled in cost, and it costs $850. Well, if you think you might be interested in starting a collection like this, I thought I might show or give you just a couple of pointers on how to get started. The first thing I always recommend is to collect what you like. You know, over time, you'll see that your collection starts to take on a personality. Mine is characterized by bold colors, strong graphics, humor, and innovation. Second, set some guidelines to help you stay focused so that your collection doesn't get out of control. Mine were the criteria that I used, that they had to have won design awards, be in museums recognized by the industry. Third, do some homework. Just like a stockbroker researches a company before he or she buys a stock, it's always helpful to learn something about the objects and why they might be important. This way you can collect intelligently. Fourth, keep good records. Record information about each object, such as who designed it and who manufactured it and the date it came out. And most importantly, put how much you paid for it. That way you'll know if it's gone up in value over time. And lastly, store your collection properly. If you love an object enough to want to use it, I oftentimes buy two, one to use and one to put away. And make sure you keep them away from heat and light sources. Many of these products are made out of plastics, and heat and light can be most damaging to those materials. And I always save the packaging and the receipts because those are the first things people throw away. And an object can be that much more valuable if it comes in its original packaging. Well, I hope I piqued your interest and that you might even want to start your own collection. But before you do, I'm going to recommend that the very first antique of the future you buy is my book. Thank you. So I think we have time for a few questions. Oh, come on. You must want to know where I store all these things, right? How do I have 300 objects and in my house, where do I put them? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. My question was whether you have any evidence on instances where designers were actually hurt by coming out with a mass-produced item. I recently read in the Wall Street Journal that Tiffany came out with a little bracelet that they thought hurt their image, even though it sold tremendously, and they actually upped the bracelet in price, so Tiffany as a company would be preserved in its brand value. Do you have any examples that come to mind in everyday items where that happened, where designers were actually hurt?
Now, when you say hurt, do you mean hurt in the pocketbook? Right. Well, I think that when you take a product to a larger market, you have greater exposure and greater potential for sales. There's a lot of designers like Mark Newson, who creates very limited production chairs and sells them for $50,000, $60,000. He also makes he made something called the Dish Doctor, which is a little plastic thing that you put your dishes in. So he designs for the mass market and he designs for a very exclusive market. So I think today, depending on the talent of the designer, you can design for multiple markets. I think manufacturers also know that. They have their bread and butter lines, which sell 90% of what they make. And then they have their exclusive lines that says that they're doing the best and the latest, and it gives them a chance to really stretch themselves. But that may be 10% of their sales. So I think you can successfully address several markets. Wow. Okay.
Hello. I was wondering about function. Function didn't seem to be on your criteria list. I mean, Dyson maybe looks nicer, but does it function better than other brands, for example?
Have you ever used it?
No.
I have one, and it really has dual cyclone action, sucking power, but it really does have a tremendous success. I mean, it's a great vacuum cleaner. I think it's a little heavier than some vacuum cleaners, but it really does work. But it's also the fact that it couldn't be that successful financially. It couldn't be the top-selling vacuum cleaner in England. It couldn't be selling at Target for $400 and not be a great vacuum cleaner. If it wasn't functional, it wouldn't have its longevity. It can't just be about the design. Oftentimes, the design...
Also marketing.
Well, yes and no. $400 at Target, that's a very high price point for that market. So if it's not also word of mouth about it, I have one. Actually, I have two. I have one I don't use, and I have one I use. But, you know, that's a really good question about function. Some of these things may not be as functional as others, and maybe the design supersedes the function. But, you know, there was something that was in the New York Times recently that said design is the new art. And is the line blurred between design and art? And do we have it more because, you know, the juicer, the lemon juicer, is it in our kitchen because we want to say we're current and we're chic and we have the latest gadget? Or do we really use that juicer? And I think it's an interesting conversation. I don't have all the answers for that.
That's another thing I was wondering about. I mean, does the juice splatter all over?
No, actually, it's tapered. It's actually tapered. And so the juice follows, except we do have an expert here who will counteract what I've just said.
I think that, I'm not the expert, but the difference between Dyson versus Philippe Starck, actually. Dyson's an engineer, and the thing works beautifully. It really does. It's expensive and it's heavy, as you said. Philippe Starck is more of an aesthetic designer and aesthetics. The teakettle never worked.
No, it didn't.
Lemon squeezer squeezes lemon all over your table. So I think that should answer your question, really. I mean, that's what you get, really. They're different kind of designers, and you can choose what you want.
Yeah, I think what has happened is that design plays more roles than it used to. It used to be just functional. And now the aesthetic component has entered. And sometimes the aesthetic may take over and be stronger, and sometimes the function may be stronger. But I think that's what's happened over this past 25 years, is that the boundaries have expanded, and that's what I'm responding to. I'm responding to the fact that this is a lemon juicer that doesn't look like any other lemon juicer I've ever seen before, and maybe I want to have it for more than just the functional reason of it being a lemon juicer.
Thank you again for your presentation. You've obviously developed an expertise, and it's very clear. As you've assessed this collection and looked at the things that you like and dislike about different products, have you ever thought about actually getting into design yourself to develop products or seeing where there's a need that you may actually fill a void?
Well, here's the thing. I was a designer for 25 years. I never designed an antique of the future, but I collected them. So I think my greatest contribution is in now speaking about design to a larger audience that didn't realize that it's all around us, and giving opportunities for designers to have a larger market because I'm out there singing the praises of great design.
In your presentation, you talked about one product that has increased in value. Can you describe how, you know, the prices have really gone up in value since when they were first created? I mean, if there is really this idea of antiques of the future, that these products will be worth and be valuable the way the antiques of past have become valuable, it seems like an exciting collectible market. And could you describe some of the products that have really increased in value?
Well, you know, something becomes an antique at very different times. So it's not like before and after. And how long something is in the market also varies. So things that are currently in the market, which most of my objects are still in production, really I can't say whether they, you know, they're at the price that they're selling at. My collection is 25 years old, and as I mentioned, one of the earliest manufacturers, Swig Pal, who's no longer in existence, and their dinnerware is so highly prized. It's in museums all over the world. People have, you know, hoarded these dishes. So I'd say, you know, not only is the manufacturing no longer around, the products aren't around, so their value has increased because people have recognized how important they are. So many of the objects that I have, I can't say that about. The few that I've shown you are a sampling of them, but in 25 years, it's hard for things to increase that significantly in value. I'll tell you something that the iMac G3 is no longer in production, and that is being collected by museums. The very first iPod is, ancient history in some respects, even though it's only a few years old. And that is highly prized. The one that had, the thick one, it almost seems like a dinosaur. We've evolved so quickly. So, picking and choosing very carefully and getting the first generations, the ones that break the mold, those are the ones that I like to look for. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much.